All right, I think we should be ready to go. We'll see what happens here as far as OBS is concerned. The stream health is A-OK, but as far as the YouTube live dashboard is concerned, the quality is just okay. And I'm not sure why that would be the case, but nothing seems to have changed. In any case, hello, fellow Sublime Text Fanatics. OdatNurd here, and welcome to tonight's live stream. We skipped a week last week due to some stuff that was going on, the personal nature, doing various random things, but here we are ready to do stuff. Now, as you can see, I've entitled this particular video "Random Stuff Number One" because I've been pretty busy with various things that I have been working on for the last little bit, and I haven't been able to decide what it was that I actually wanted to cover in tonight's live stream. So I'm just going to look at some, randomy type stuff, as, the title indicates. And yeah, so there we go. And also, just as a quick reminder, if you find my videos helpful, or maybe even these live streams, even when they are as rambly as they sometimes tend to get, please thumb and subscribe as you deem appropriate. And you can also, if you have any suggestions for videos you'd like me to make, topics you'd like me to cover, anything like that, you can go ahead and show those to me on Twitter at OdatNurd, or drop them into the comments section below in this video here, or any of the videos that I've created, and we will take those under advisement for potential topics. And as a matter of fact, a video dropped just today about build systems, and I did get a suggestion from someone, Marcos, I want to say. I can't quite remember the name at the moment. I don't have the page handy, asking about some package previews, and I actually have some of those planned. But here on my screen right now, as you can see, I don't have Sublime. What I actually have is Fusion, specifically Blackmagic Fusion, which is a compositing program similar to After Effects, I'm led to believe. And this is the Linux version of it, and I use it to create all of the thumbnails for the videos that I create. Although I'm thinking maybe I might want to stop doing that because this is the last version of it and it released in 2012. It seems like Blackmagic Design have moved away from having Fusion as a dedicated application, and instead they have built it into their DaVinci Resolve video editor, which is also pretty good, but I don't use that for doing my video editing, so that makes it less cool for me than it could be. And it doesn't run as well under the particular flavor of Linux that I use. Oh, hey, good news. YouTube has decided that the stream health is good. Hooray! So in any case, just I thought it might be interesting to see how these things are made up, particularly because right up as we can see around 7:48 p.m. today, 10 minutes before the stream, is when I decided that I would just I hadn't actually created a thumbnail for the next topic because I couldn't decide what it was, and that's how I ended up with random stuff number one. So we can see this is what the thumbnail looks like when all is said and done. And if you're unfamiliar with Fusion, it's a node-based system instead of a layer-based system, which I think is what After Effects is. The thing I liked about Fusion is that it is absolutely free to use. There's a studio version that does everything this version does and has a couple of extra features that you have to pay for. But there's also just a free version that is 99% fully functional. Use it for whatever you want. I use it also for the animated intros. For example, this one that I forgot to do at the beginning of the stream. This is what happens when you get excited about how you totally set up other lower thirds type things. That whole animation was created in this very program. And It goes a little something like this. As we can see in the right-hand pane, that's what the final thumbnail looks like. But if we come over to this one and click like so, we can see that it starts off with just a screenshot of Sublime at actually a, it's already zoomed in. Okay, and 1920 by 1080. This is just a native split, and I put something on the right that seems to be appropriate. And then we get a 3D camera pointing at an image plane like so, and render out, and that ends us up with basically tilting the image, and then we transform it to the right to put it into the position that we see in the final thumbnail. Additionally, there is this nice ellipse here that is filled with gray that's transparent on the right-hand side, and a nice little drop shadow effect as well. And when those two are merged together, that gives us the bulk of that part. And then, of course, there is various bits of text, which all combine together to provide that information there. This merge would also probably be interesting to see. That's the final one. And of course, there's also that picture of me that's shunted over to the left and translated. And when stuck all together, we end up with the final result on the right. And the reason I do that in this program is twofold, because each one of the videos is its own frame. So I can easily track which video is which. And we can come all the way back here and see that frame 0 is the to be announced image. And also, you can script this in Lua and Python. I use Lua because I also work with this a fair bit under Windows as well, and I don't have Python installed on that machine. Unlike Sublime, in order to script in Fusion with Python, you actually have to have an exact version of Python installed, whereas the Lua environment is built in. But there is a script up here, and as a matter of fact, I could even go ahead and click that that I created that allows me to type in output prefix for where the images are supposed to go, a CSV file that lists the subtitles and names of every video and what frame it should start on. This one starts on frame 0 because it has that catch-all. And when I hit the key, it automatically generates this composition, replaces the images as appropriate, and away we go. Though that killed some tiny amount of time. Yeah, so I am by no means a graphics expert, and I found this pretty easy to use once I spent, a couple of hours playing around with it. And like I said, this is free. I believe if you use DaVinci Resolve, you can also do the exact same stuff in there. I just, partially because it doesn't work under Linux, and partially because of inertia, if you will. We can jump back to Sublime for the remainder of this. And I think for our purposes here, I might go ahead and close. Oh, maybe I'll size that window down instead and move this one over. I'm just working on another desktop here so that I can still sort of see what's going on to some degree. There we go. That ought to do it. So what we're seeing here is just an example of my workflow when I answer questions for people on the forum or on Stack Overflow. I, very quickly would do a thing where I open up the command palette, say new plugin, like so, get a whole new plugin, paste in the appropriate code. I always just save it as untitled, make sure that what I'm about to say works before I say it, and then when I'm done, I delete. Now, this particular thing, this is a question that BPL had in the forum just today, wherein he wanted to replicate Sublime's ability to split the selection into lines like so. Now, his version of the code did not have these two lines, so I'm just going to comment that out. And as a matter of fact, I might even go so far as to say, instead of being example, this should be my split into lines, just to make that a little bit easier to test. So standard split into lines. If the cursor spans multiple things, when you hit it, the first line gets a selection, the last line gets a selection, and you'll notice that that first selection goes from the start to the end of the first line, and the last line goes from the start of the line to the cursor position. If there were 3 lines and you do it, the same thing happens for the first and last line, but the middle line is always the full item. Now, and let's also just test this because this isn't something I tested before. If there was just one cursor, pushing the key does nothing, right? And if the cursor's selecting even 2 characters and you hit the key, it just jumps to the end. So these are the situations that this command works in, and BPL was having a problem. Again, his version of the code didn't have these 2 commented outline parts, and this part's slightly different. This part was inline, but that makes no never mind. So he was having a problem because if you span 2 lines and use his version, the first line would automatically work. It would get from the start where the cursor was, or this where the selection started, to the end of the line. But in the second one, it gets you all the way to the end of the line. Whereas remember, if we do that with the built-in version, it stops where the cursor ends. So that was a problem that he was having. And my suggestion to him in that case was to add in an extra case like so that when you use this command that way, that works. Now, what's this actually doing? We could, cover that aliasing self.view, so you don't have to say self.view everywhere view appears, which in this case is only in a couple of places, so that's not as egregious as it could be, but I do like to do that myself. I'm not fond of single letter variable names except for I for loops. But this is looping over every selection in the list of selections in this view, and view.lines, as we can see, if I go ahead and use HyperHelp, returns a list of the lines in sorted order that intersect the region, because selections are, in fact, regions, right? So this returns the first those lines 5 and 6, and this would return just line 5, of course, and this would return lines 5, 6, and 7. And his original code enumerates over all of those different lines. Now again, they're spitting out, as we can see over here, as a list of regions on each line. So if it's the very first region in the list, then it wants to append a region that starts at where the selection starts and ends at the end of the very first line, which is why doing something like this does what it's supposed to do. The selection started right there and it goes to the end of the line. And otherwise, it would just add the line as a whole. So as we can see again, if we comment those lines out, if the line spans 2 lines like so, or let's say even 3 lines, if you use the built-in Sublime command to do this, you end up with the exact same text selected, but now the end of every line has a caret, and on that last line, the selection only runs until the end of the selection. But if we were to instead use the my split into lines command by pushing the other key, the selection on the last line jumps to the end of the line, and that's because it's not doing anything special, it's just appending that last line. So what we do to fix that is add another test. So if it's the very first line in the selection, i.e. like this, then the region starts at the beginning of the selection and goes to the end of the very first line. If the region that we're at is the last one in the line, then the region starts at the beginning of the line and it ends at the end of the selection, which is where the cursor is right now. And for everything else, append the full lines. And once that's done, we clear the selection and then add in all of the new ones. And we end up with the appropriate result. Now, BPL mentioned that his version of the code didn't work the way the built-in one doesn't. This is the only thing I could find for how it's different, so I added that. And I guess the question then also becomes, is there a more succinct way to write this? And that I'm not entirely sure of. There might be. Um, I I agree that it doesn't look as elegant as it could, but I also don't know how one might make it more elegant either. So there is that aspect as well. Um, Hang on a second here, my friends. There we go. Is that telling me what I think it is? Yes, yes, it is. Okay. Sorry, I just got a little information window going over here on my right-hand monitor. Um, so that was the last thing I did before I left for the day. And now that I've helped him with that, I can go ahead and send that to the trash. I don't need that particular plugin anymore. Um, excuse me. If he needs further help, it's easy enough to create that because the post has the original thing in it. And oh, hang on just a second here. Hopefully, I have the fan on because we're into the heart of summer now, and it's a little warm to be sitting here in the nexus of one, two, three, four, five different computers um, in the middle of summer without a fan going. But I did some testing; we don't hear it, or at least I didn't when I was testing it. So hopefully that is also the case. But enough of that because we should get back into actual plugin-y type stuff here. Um, One of the things I would like to do is in the next week or two is push out a new release of Override Audit for the features that we have already implemented in previous live streams, and which includes the ability to revert a plugin and having the override report show you when there are files that exist in the unpacked package but don't exist in the source package to remind you that there's extra content there. I've been testing that quite a bit across, all of my computers, working on stuff. I haven't run into any problems other than the one that I did on the very next day when I realized there was a weird edge case for what happens if. Gee, I can't even remember what that edge case was now. If the package only has those files in it, then it wasn't displaying something that it was supposed to display, I think was the case. Um, But there are some other features that I would like to add in there. And there was actually some stuff that we were working on in the past that I never did fully get working the way I wanted. So maybe that might be something to work on here. Because if I do view package file, right, and I pick some file that doesn't exist in the actual folder for the packages folder, like default comment.py, let's say, that's coming directly out of the packed packages folder or the packed Sublime package file, right? So what I end up with is a file that is read only, and it's a quote unquote officially open file. You'll note if I push Control Z, it doesn't go away or anything like that. If I used package resource viewer to open a resource from the default package named comment.py, what I end up with is a buffer that has all of that whole side area there is green because this is text that was newly added into this buffer, because what package resource viewer does is create a new tab and then load the content of the file and paste it in here, and it's doing that in a way where I can actually edit it now, right? But notice if I press undo one too many times, the content of the file goes away, and then you have to try to redo to put it back. And I'm going to close that without saving and do it again just to see. If I said default comment.py, what I end up with is a tab that doesn't look modified. Okay, which is an important distinction because as soon as I type something, now it looks modified, and when I undo to go back to where I was, the buffer is still modified, which is what's allowing me to do that, right? Now, I think what we were working on specifically was for HyperHelp and not for this. So let's go ahead for that for override audit. Um, that was some other stuff. And actually, it might be easier if I was to open the repository and merge, I would imagine. Yeah. Creating a file for an initial topic. Oh my, was I not working on that here? I might have actually been working on that in a place. Oh, right, I remember. Whoops. It was a HyperHelp author, my bad. Yeah, it wasn't HyperHelp itself. Open packed files is the branch. There we go. You see we had some code in here where we create a new file, set it to be Scratch, set its file name to be the appropriate path, run a command to append the content of the file that was loaded previously. As a matter of fact, we could maybe even open that in the editor just to be able to see that. Is that the right location? I guess. Oh, did I have more than one of those? No. No, I did not. Oh, I guess it's this one. No, that's not that one either. What the heck, man? It is picking entirely what appears to be the wrong files for this operation. Apply authoring settings. Oh, I see. Yeah. Hi, I'm not on that branch. Derp derp, I'm on master. Oh, okay. That is the code as it existed in that thing. So I could, for example, just copy that temporarily and just to be able to look at what it was going to do. Paste it in here. I swear. So there's some stuff that's different there. So what was this actually trying to do? Open the file if it exists. If it doesn't exist, load the appropriate resource for the file. And if it doesn't work, leave. Otherwise, create a new file with the appropriate syntax. Set it to be a scratch buffer, retarget it to be the appropriate file, append the text, and set the reference document. Now that is something that Package Resource Viewer is not doing, which is why that line ends up. It shows you that all that content is new when technically it's not. I think I'd like to know a little more about how Package Resource Viewer knows what syntax it should use to apply. Maybe it uses, oh, I might have gone about that in an entirely, oh, I was saying an entirely dumb way. Let's see if we can't sort of re-implement that in its own brand new state. So they're going to go ahead and undo that change. And again, just go back to an empty window. This is how I start most of my plugin explorations. I go like that. I say new plugin like so. We save that to be example command. And I need to go back to my key bindings because I normally use this as, oops. Did I changed the, huh. All right. I think I have completely forgotten how to revert that change, man. I've also forgotten exactly whereabouts in the menu that particular command is. That's next in previous. This is how long it's been since I've actually fiddled with Oh, there we go. Oh, it doesn't have a key binding. Oh, well, that might explain some stuff. I wonder what happened to my key binding. Anyway, that explains why that key wasn't doing what I wanted. So, now when I push the key, it wrecks my file. So that's good. The first thing we actually want is for this to be a window command instead, because we're going to use it to open a file. And in that case, it doesn't need to have, well, it does need to have an argument, doesn't it? We'll say file is equal to packages user. What's a good, sure, Python.sublime settings. Let's say that's the default for that argument, so we don't have to do anything special there, and then we print file, right? So when I hit the key, it prints that. Now, oh, no, I moved too many things out of the way. That's a far level of unfortunate. Incidentally, did you know that even if it's a hot day, crazy people will still drink coffee? If we look for open file, we can see that open file opens the named file, returns the corresponding view. If the file is already opened, it's brought to the front. Note that as file loading is asynchronous, operations on the return view won't be possible until its isLoading method returns false. It will be opened in the provided group. Optional flags. Now, what this doesn't do is open files with names like this, I think. So if I was to say window.openFile and the name of the file was, maybe I had all the characters, then when I hit it, it doesn't work, right? I still get a view object back, but it was unable to open that. And if I said view.filename, its file name is, as we can see, home T Martin config Sublime Text 3 packages user python.sublime settings. So it actually tried, it inferred that it was a relative file name and then attack that onto the current path, which happens to be my user package. So this file does not, in fact, open, but it still returns the appropriate thing there. But what we could do is a little bit of extra magic here. So for our purposes, here's what we're going to do. And again, this is how I would build something like this up, although I wouldn't talk while I was doing it. I could say self.window.open file and open the file, and we don't have to print it anymore. And when I hit the key, I end up with that broken buffer, right? And again, if I hover there, you can see it's an incorrect path, and I do not want to do anything there. So one thing I might want to do is import OS here, let's say. And I could say if os.path.exists, well, actually I could say if not os.path exists file, then displays an error dialog to the user, right? So I could say return sublime.error message unable to find file to open. Okay, otherwise it tries to open it. So when I hit the key, we see unable to find file to open because that file does not currently exist. What we could actually even do instead is say if os.file.path exists, return that directly. But again, we're building up to how we want this to work. So the first thing I want to do is know when the file's not there, which in this case is going to generate an error, right? Now, I believe we want window extract variables. Whoops. Variables. There we go. And I'll say vars equals self window. Oh, variables is self.window dot extract variables. And then I can say file is equal to self.window dot expand variables in file from variables. And if I remember that correctly, this will be really awesome because it expands any variables in the string value using the variables defined in the dictionary variables. And value can be a list or a dict as well as just a string, in which case it's recursively expanded. So you pass some value in and a dictionary of variables, and it expands all of those variables and returns you back a duplicate of value where all the strings that had variables have things expanded. Any variables that exist that don't have a variable in the table that you provide there in the variables argument get expanded to the empty string or their default value if you use that colon syntax. For example, if this was $name colon Terrence, then if there wasn't a variable named name, the value would be Terrence uh, in that particular case. And we could also do that, which is, returns a dictionary of strings being populated with contextual keys. Now, our particular command here is always supposed to work with packages files, which is why we're doing this here. So we ask the window to give us all the variables, which includes the packages folder, which arguably is something we could figure out for ourselves, but it's easier to do that than to try to create the dictionary with the one key we need. And as an added benefit, all of this other stuff will also work in there. We pass it to expand variables, and now I would imagine, still see that um, we're not getting the error message there. We are getting a, oh, that didn't work. Why did that not work? Is that not a, oh, it's a Sublime. Oh, my bad. I think the other one was too, wasn't it? I did not notice that. I forgot. Well, that one I think, yeah, is window because there's things like the project and file path are specific to the window. Okay, so now when I do it, we end up with the actual settings file opening. And that's because now it's actually expanding the appropriate name, right? So that still works. So what we have now is sort of that thing that we were talking about before. If we want to say if the path to the file exists, then just go ahead and open it. Otherwise, complain that the file can't be opened. So now when I hit the key, the file opens. And if this was, let's say, default, that doesn't exist, so it's unable to find the file to open. Now let's say that this was actually exec.py. Unable to find the file to open, but we do know that if we view package file like this and do default exec.py, the file does exist. I just don't have an override for it right now. So we've gotten ourselves now to the point where this determines the full file name that we're interested in. And this will try to find it or open it. Now is the part where we say, how do we get the contents of a package resource by name? So we say load resource, and it takes a given resource. The name should be in the format packages default main.sublime menu, which isn't what was passed up here, right? So what we want to do is take our example back now. So we wanted this to say packages user python.sublime settings, right? That's the default thing. So now when we try to run it, of course, it can't find that because it's not using the correct path. But what we don't want to do now is extract variables. What we do want to do is say, if we said sublime.packages path, that gives us a folder name that goes all the way up to the packages folder. We're going to imagine that everything that gets passed into us doesn't have the text packages in front of it, because it's just, we're going to say, no, it has to have packages in it because we need to use other stuff. So what we want to do is test to see if there is a local version of this in the packages folder. So what we need to do is import OS down here. And I think if I said that the path was this, then os.path I can't remember what the dang thing is called for split. Maybe a split path. Nope. All right. I have to Google it. I do not work with paths nearly enough. Python remove path component, because it's going to say yeah, it thinks you should well, I don't think those are the right things, but we could say dir name. That gives us that part, and base name gives us that part, and Python, let's say Python split path components, because I know that there's a thing in here that does it. Base name, common path, common prefix, directory name exists. Expand, 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 is, don't care, join. It's the opposite of join is what we want here. Oh, maybe I was. Oh, it is split. Oh. I thought that's my bad. I think of split and I think of the string method split where you tell it what you want to split on, which is what that Stack Overflow answer was doing, splitting on os.sep. We actually want something like that. That gives us the path name over there and the base name over there. That's not particularly nice. We do know that all package resources are supposed to be using the /path mechanism, in which case we could just always split by / and remove the first item. That was totally a problem that came up in one of the most recent dev build series with Sublime Ripple, which I think I've covered on a stream before now that I think about it. But basically, it does some stuff with paths that are Windows paths and not POSIX paths like this. And older versions of Sublime, it would just work. And then in the dev build, they optimized looking up resources to check the catalog first, and that made Sublime REPL break. And because so many people use Sublime REPL, they backed out that optimization for Windows to put it back to where it used to be. I guess the cleverest way is probably not to even worry about that. We might say real name is os path join, and what we're going to join is sublime.packages path, and what we're also going to join is file 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I can never remember which order that goes in. So path 9. Nope, 9 : starting there on. I never remember exactly what side the colon is supposed to be on. Use the string slice. So the real name of the file is whatever the package's path is, and whatever the file name that you provide with the 9 characters sprang off the front. And of course, we could check to make sure that this starts with the text packages and complain if not. And then if the path exists, real name. Well, actually, I probably should have just did that this other way, huh? So now it's trying to open packages user Python, and that works. But if it was packages default exec.py, whoops. Oh, my fingers are up by one. I'm slouching too far back to get into the fan. I should lean forward a little bit. Now it no longer works. We get that error message. So this is the native, the file's there, just go ahead and open it. This is the we need to do magic stuff in order to get this to work. Now, what we could say is window.run command open file, and the file name we want to open, say we said packages default exec.py, which I don't think is going to work. Nothing happens there. Oh, right, because that's totally not a dictionary. So it tries to open it and it can't find it. That happens to be the correct path, but I think that is 100% a fluke because the current file happens to be in that directory. If I was to go ahead and jump to my home directory and open like test.txt or something, well, maybe this one. Now if I do it, it's unable to find the file to open, and it's unable to, oh, wait a minute. If it exists, do that. If it does, oh, sorry, yeah. Now that what I meant to do was run that other command. I forgot I hadn't added it yet. If I do this, it still doesn't work, but now the path is relative to my home directory. That's because that's where this file is located. So what we need to do to get that to work, unlike the open file window command, this will open this sort of file directly, although it does give you that thing down there. And if I said view.filename, you end up with what name it should actually have, which is nice. So this really strikes me as the sort of thing that we were working with before. So maybe what we want to do is just always file is equal to file9 : like so, okay? So that the file name we have just always has packages split off. So now we can just say, is there actually a file that exists in the packages path named that? And if there is, just tell the window to open it. And not only will that open the file the first time you do it, it'll also find an existing file in this window and open it and focus it if it's already been opened. Otherwise, we get this little error message here, right? So we're still getting an error message there like so. But what we could do in this case is say what I just did down here, which is self.window.run command, and the command to run is open file, and then the file to open is OS. No, we don't even need to do that, do we? Yeah, we do. os.path.join. And here we would say $packages, let's say, and file. And then do that. And I don't really like how that is kind of a crunky name, but we're going to do that. So now when we hit the key, oh, wait a minute. What did that do? It still didn't open it. Is that command not supposed, did that not, remember, if I did this, it works, right? Oh, wait a minute, close that. That part worked as expected. Doing that works. So maybe we'll test what this looks like. Print that. Don't open it. And packages. Is it actually sensitive to a little bit of that action, perhaps? It shouldn't be, but we'll test it. Oh, what do you know? That's unexpected. Live and learn. So we could do that. Da, da, da. So get the actual file. Look to see if you take the packages path and the name of the file and that file exists, open it. Otherwise, what we're working with is a resource spec. So we might say res name is equal to packages and file. And then this part is a lot nicer because we just say res name like this, right? So now if we tell it to open that file, it does. Now, we're on line 467, column 1 for whatever reason. I might want to say view is equal to self.window.active view. So that's the view of the file that just opened. View.set read only false. So if I close that and hit this, I'm still not read only in there. Now remember, I think that was something that we had seen before. So we'll say def tweak buffer. And we want to provide it the name. Does that even matter? I don't think it does. We'll give it a view. So that works. And then we say sublime.set timeout lambda self.tweak buffer. Oh, move that up, I suppose. View. So if I close that, hit the key again, now we're getting a little bit of this action, but we're also view.isScratch is returning true. So we also want to say view.setScratch false. Now I think this is where we might have ran into problems before. Yeah, we get a little bit of that action because magic. Maybe if we do it in a different order, does that help? No. So what we did in the previous stream in this case was we had an onModified event handler that looked to see, and we left the file as read only, and then, or as scratch, and then we set it to be not scratch as soon as anything was modified. But that does stop you from undoing back, though. So there's that. Basically, what we're trying to do is something like Package Resource Viewer, but which is nicer. You can see this isn't tracking um, the changes to the buffer either. It doesn't have anything associated with it. So if we set it wasn't read only and it wasn't scratch, and then we said view.set reference document view.subster len view, like so, we end up with a thing, and that doesn't do anything either, huh? Am I using that the right way? Uses the string reference to calculate the initial diff for the incremental diff. I wonder if I could just say reset reference document. Well, that I've ever played with that one, to be perfectly honest. We don't want it to be scratch. We don't want it to be read-only. Let's say we set reference document and the document is hi. How about that? Why is the cursor always down there? Something not quite right about that. Close without saving. Let's close that one. Whoop! I pushed that key in a way I did not mean to. That key, excuse me. Close without saving. Does this have any change? Close without saving. Yeah, it just seems to always do something funky with that. That's weird. Let's go ahead and give that a little test, shall we? I just so happen to have if I said install a build of 3208 in a sandbox. Okay, wait a second. Default exec. Line 467, column 1. That is some wiggy business. Does it always do that for every file? It's just always at the bottom? I guess it's just always at the bottom. Huh. Well, the easiest way to resolve that is to quit that and quit that. And I guess what happens if I open, an actual file for opening's sake? The cursor's at the start. So I would expect this command to do the same thing. So if I said, one way to do this is to, do that and be unhappy. The other way is to just look at the key binding, but view.run command move. I think we probably just need to do that. I don't think we need to pass extend, if I had to guess. But maybe we might need a comma in there because that's how the code works. That looks a little nicer. View.set reference document ha. I'm really confused about why that would be the case. Because if we created the thing and did that, Huh. Close without saving. Close without saving. No file backing it on disk. Probably the reason for that. Which is why that's not doing anything. But it works like this. So why does that not work for that part? You can see that it used to be ha, now it's all this. So that's what we're trying to do here. What if we just turn both of those out? I can't modify it. I do get a gigantic diff though. Maybe I need to change this for a file that's a little smaller. Whoops. Default. That's too big. What's a nice tiny file? Yeah, no kidding. Default, a macro. Yeah, like that. So, swap this to be this. That part goes away. That's a little too much, thank you. Bang, we get that. We can't edit it, we can't do anything, but if I toggle the diff, we can see that doing something. It used to be high, and now it's not. So that's nice. So if I did set the reference document to view.subster, is there a shortcut for this? The contents of the region as a string. That's what I thought. Sublime.region0 len view. So now it is in fact not different at all. Whoops. And now that we've done that, if we said it wasn't a read-only file, then that's no good. If we thought it wasn't a scratch file, we still can't see any diff, but we can't edit it either. Gotta stop doing that. Close without saving. And if we did both of those things and ran it, we can edit it. If I save, it should, I think, throw an error maybe. No, I think they actually have that folder there. But see now, even though it's saved, it's still not doing anything. So that would lead me to wonder, the next thing to do is jump over to the Sublime documentation, which I'm doing in a window over on the right-hand side of the desktop, and look at incremental diff and say, view.settings.get mini-diff. False, disable incremental diff. So it's turning it off is what it's doing. So that's irritating and weird. Run the command. So let's see. Maybe we don't even need to do that part. Let's see. we're going to say view.settings.set incremental diff true, like so. So when I hit it, oh yeah, I guess I gotta delete that file. So when I hit it, I get that, and then I save. Why did I set that to incremental diff when obviously the setting is mini diff? I am not having a good night. That's not even the correct way to do that per se. Okay, so check that out. Now it thinks it used to be nothing and now it's something. So we do in that case want to still do that. So we hit it, we end up with a file that looks modified. We can see what's different. The file being modified tells us that this is a file that doesn't exist on disk right now. So saving it would create it, which I think actually makes some logical sense. We can actually use internal functionality to see what we changed. Excuse me. Do that, for example. And then when I jump between, I can see what exactly did I do here. I did that, and I can see that's what it used to be, and that's what it is now. And when I save, that will actually save the file. So we're actually fairly close to what we want this to do. One problem, such as it is that the default directory currently exists. So, oops. Oh yeah, and there's stuff in there that I don't want to fiddle with. So that's no good. As an example, let's do this. I had a help thing in ASP because I was testing something with HyperHelp authoring tools at one point. So with that in place, we actually need ASP, nothing short, huh? Well, I guess comments is pretty good. So let's ding that. Packages ASP comments.tm preferences, like so. Okay, so if I hit it, there's the file. It's not read-only, it's modified. It's telling me that there is actually something in here. I can actually change some stuff. I could take it back to what it was, but what I can't ever do is that. And if I try to save this, I should get an error because that path doesn't exist. So the other part of this that we would need to do is have a class example event listener. Sublime plugin dot event listener. Actually, we might even want to make this be a view event listener, if I remember correctly. View event listener on pre-save. Thus, called just before a view is saved. So I'm going to say here, we're going to print on pre-save in sample event listener. Now, if I recall correctly, we need a something like at class method def is applicable class and settings. The default always returns true. So if I said return true like so, then this would be the case. And once I save this, every time I save, we see that happening. Okay, now What we say is maybe just to make this a little easier, what we will do is save that. There we go. Let's copy that, jump over to here, VPF user key Linux, and add in args of that like so. So now we don't even need to do that part. This can go away and it should still do what we want. See, that's it, just noticing the file's already open and jumping to it. So let's close that without saving. But what we can do now is we can say def is enabled self and file and say return file dot starts with packages. So now we know for sure that this command will only work when the file argument you provide is in the packages folder, which makes it safe for us to discard that part of the name. You can say directly open files that exist with no future, with no further fuss. Otherwise, we have to do magic stuff. Convert the view. Sorry, convert the file name to a package resource and open it. Capture the opened view and tweak the buffer. Having a 1 there makes never mind. The magic of this realistically is that settings like fiddling the reference document and set read only and set scratch and stuff don't work directly in the command right after that was opened. And the reason for that, I would imagine, is actually because it's still loading. That might be the reason why that doesn't work. So let's test that as well, because that's probably a better way to go. So maybe we're going to move it to the beginning of the line. Let's comment all. Now we won't call tweak buffer directly there like that, okay? What we will do is say view.settings.set is example true. And what we want here, instead of always returning true, because you'll notice every time I save any file, it's still doing that. I want to say return settings.get is example with the default value of false. So now when I save this file, I don't see anything. But if I run the command when I save it in here, I do also not see it. View.settings.get. Did I spell it wrong? That should tweak that particular setting. So checking applicability and that. So false true. Oh, well, that happens quite a bit. Oh, it's because the plugin is changing. Right. Okay. So over here, if I clear this console, when I try to save on pre-save in sample event listener, and then it's unable to reset file info. Not entirely sure what that. Probably something to do with Gitty type stuff for the incremental diff, and then it can't save it because there's no directory. But it only happens. It only says on pre-save in there. It doesn't say it in any other file. For example, if I save this one, it just says it's saved. So if that's the case, can I do an on load in view event listener? Yes, I can. So what if I said def on load self and all of this came to here? Let's turn that stuff off. Let's just do that, and there, and there were all self dot. So if I close that and hit the key, that didn't seem to do squat doodle. Let's see. The event has triggered. But it still doesn't do nothing. All right, so I guess you do have to do it that way, which is a little odd. That works. See, the way that the async works and the other one doesn't would lead me to believe that maybe that's the right way to do that, but more than likely there's some weird race condition where you just need some thread that's not this one to do something. And I know the load event might trigger right away for that. So let's not bother with doing it as an event like that. We don't need that because we know that part's still working. And we do want to do that. Now, something I do want to check here is if I did this and set view settings get mini diff, it is true by default because that's what's coming from my preferences. And this is setting it to false explicitly when it tries to open the file, and I'm the one that's setting it to be true, as we can see there. So the better way to do this, and this is just really not a nice, I mean, I guess we can make it nicer later-ish. Would be sublime.load settings preferences.sublime settings. Settings.get mini diff. So that should still have the effect that we want. Actually, we might even want to go so far as to say mini diff equals settings.get mini diff. There should be a default for that, so we won't worry about it here. This will be set to mini diff. This part is always supposed to happen. Run command move to and that. And then here we would say true means always do it. Auto means do it for files in a Git repository. And false means don't do it. So let's say if mini diff, then do this. So if the user's preference for minidiff was set to false, then that command already set this to false no matter what the setting was set to. And then, oh, excuse me, I bumped the microphone. Then we don't have to do anything with minidiff. If it's set to true, that's always enable diff. So set it to the same value, true, and set up the reference document. And if it was auto, that's still a truthy value because it's a string. Then it'll only enable it for files in a Git repository. And if we set that there as well, then it should only track it if the package is actually in a Git repository. So let's assume that's probably what we want there. So that gets us a lot of the, or most of the, or all of the way to doing what we want, except for being able to save a thing like this. And what we would actually do here is print view.filename. Sorry, self.view.filename. Now, I'm going to do that so that you can see that when we do this, we get a full file name for this thing. Unable to save, blah, 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 blah. And it's got the exact full name. So again, if I did import os and os.path.dir name, and this was the entire path of the file, then what we end up with is the full path to that thing, right? So what we would then do here is say path equals os.path.dir name self.view.file name, and then we pydocs make dir. And specifically, we want make dir's recursive directory creation like make dir, but makes all intermediate level directories needed to contain the leaf directory. The default mode is 0777. On some systems, mode is ignored. Where it's used, the current umask value is first masked out, which is exactly what we want there. And so we want to say os.makedir's path and exist okay equals true. Before Python 3.3.6, if exist okay was true and the directory existed, makeDirs would still raise an error if mode didn't match. We don't care about that. So this might raise an error. So we'll try this and accept and print error creating package directory for new override, let's say. We don't need to print the name. But what this should do is we do it, we've opened a file that doesn't already exist. We can see us making changes to it. Like we say for ASP, actually, we want this to be dot or bang, bang, bang like that. And we can go here and say, okay, well, we don't want that. And that's the only change. And we're happy with that. So we hit save. And as soon as we do, it has created the appropriate directory and it saved it. And we can see it's generating mana info summary. And now there is an override on ASP comments.tm preferences. And if we diff it, we can see the line is that changing. And we can also go ahead and open it here and put it back to the way it started and see that there's no difference. And then delete because, oops. Yes, excuse me. So we can close that, refresh that. ASP is no longer in the list. This file no longer exists, but I could save it to recreate it. So what we've got here actually is a fairly nice implementation of create overrides. Assuming you could pass it the name of a file that has its full package's path associated with it. it should create a new folder. Oh, the other thing I guess we want to do in this case, if creating the directory worked, then setting self.view.settings.erase is example, like so. So when you first open, tracing through all of this code and what it does, when you tell the command to open, you pass it a file. The first thing is it will only be enabled if it starts with packages / with that case. And that's just because Linux is case sensitive, even if other platforms aren't. And there are some issues on the issue tracker for Sublime where it gets unhappy in some cases if there's case differences because um, packages are zip files and zip files are generally case sensitive, or at least the zip entries that fall out are, and you have to go out of your way to not do that. And why do that when one of the platforms you support is case sensitive, right? So the command is only enabled for files that are actually packages, and the first thing it does is strip off the packages prefix, which you could even add strip packages like so, and then try to directly open the file if it exists. So if we remove packages, add the packages path to the name of the file, and such a file exists, then try to open it. Otherwise, and leave. Otherwise, we add the text packages, use open file to open the thing, grab the current view, and then set in a setting that says we set this up magically to be an override and it didn't already exist in the packages directory, and then set a timeout to tweak the buffer settings so that it comes to here, it loads the user preferences and gets the mini diff setting out of it, because we know that when we open a particular buffer this way, it always wants to set mini diff to false, which is probably because internally it knows that it opened the file from a package and there's not a file to diff it against, if I had to guess. And then we make sure we're at the start of the file as if we just opened it. We make sure that it's not read-only because that command opens things read-only, and we make sure that it's not a scratch buffer, which will cause it to be show as being modified, which is good because it's reminding you that if you save the changes to that file, you're creating an override, and if you close it, you're discarding potentially an override. Now, maybe that is something that we could fix. We could fix it so that if you try to close a file like that, that hasn't actually been modified by you, then it doesn't need to prompt you and it could set it to scratch again before it closes. That's something we could do. And if the mini-diff setting in the user preferences indicates that there should be mini-diff, set the reference document to whatever the current buffer is, so as you make changes, you can see what you changed based on the underlying command. And then because of that setting, this event listener only applies to views with that setting set. And before you save, it tries to get the path of the file name and create the directory. And if that works, it erases the setting, because now, as far as anything is concerned, this file is just a file that exists on disk. We don't need to do anything special. If there's an error making the directories, we don't remove the setting. There will be an error generated as a dialog, as we've seen, and then the user could say, oh, wait, my permissions are wrong, and go ahead and fiddle them around, and then resolve that particular issue. Now, I like this for what it is as compared to the one we generated previously. So that's nice because it seems to work a lot better. Now, change count, then change each time the buffer is modified, the change count is incremented. The change count can be used to determine if the buffer has changed since the last time it was inspected. This is that whole thing where, okay, if I do that, this file didn't exist, so it opened it from a file, right? So if I said view.changeCount, its value is 1. Now if I modify it, change count is 13. 13 things changed. If I undo it back to where it started, the change count keeps going up because undoing also counts as changing, which is somewhat unfortunate for our purposes. What we'd really like is for this, I suppose, for the tab to not be modified unless you modify it. But the only way to do that is to have it be scratch and remove the scratch setting when the buffer is modified. But then when you undo back to the start, it doesn't unmodify it, if you will. It's a bit of a dilemma. I'm not sure what the best way to handle that would be. I know previously we tried something like on modified, which would say after a change has been made, and we could do the same thing there as we did for this. This event listener here could have an on modified, and it's only going to happen for files that are example files, which will go away the very first time we successfully save the file. The setting will go away, and then we don't have to do magic tracking anymore. But we could say if the view is scratch and the file was modified, then remove the scratch setting. That might be something that's fun. Let's give that a try. Def on modified self. If self.view.is scratch, self.view.set scratch false. And when we tweak the buffer, we don't do this part. We don't set scratch false. So we close this without saving. And now when we run it, we end up with a buffer, which as we can see, has one change. And is it a scratch buffer? Yes. So I can close it if I want, and nothing will prompt me to save the changes. As soon as I make a change, now it's tracking that it's modified, but if I undo it all the way back to this state, it doesn't go back to being scratch again, which is not as cool as it could be. Try to remember what the name of the command history. Returns the command name, command arguments, and repeat count for the given history entry as stored in the undo redo stack. Index 0 corresponds to the most recent command. Positive values for index indicate to look at the redo stack. If the undo redo history doesn't extend far enough, none zeros returned. Only return entries that modified the buffer. We might also just go ahead and print this. Print, oh, that's wrong. Like, self.view.command history. 0 is the most recent command. We want the command before the most recent command, like so. So you'll notice, yeah, okay, that's good. No command. It really makes it seem like if you run this, what's the return? The command name, the command arguments, and the repeat count. So on modified, if this view is scratch, set scratch false. If, okay, command can't remember what the magic, I think something like that, equals self.view.command history for the previous command. And print command. So in that case, if command is equal to the empty string self.view.set scratch true, else if, whoa, self view is scratch, like so. So let's see what that does. The buffer does not appear to be modified. I can't undo. I make some changes. The buffer tab appears to be modified. I undo, I undo, I undo. Print. I gotta stop leaning back into the flow of this fan. That would allow me to see this a little better. Yeah, see, that part seems to work. But if you modify and then I'm undone the did, I guess I probably do need the modified. Whoops. So I don't care about yeah, that doesn't work so well either. So I'm not really a fan of how to set that logic up. So I think maybe just that. Mark this buffer as not being scratched the very first time any modification that's not to the actual thing is made. If that's not the case, you can always check to see what you changed, like so, but you can't take it back to there. Kind of like that one. No, I gotta say, it's a pretty nice implementation of this thing. And so we might call this create override command. And we might call this create override event listener. Over here, this needs to be create override instead. kind of like it when it looks like this a little more than that, just so that looks like a nice little thing. So we're going to create and override for the provided file, which should be in the form packages / package name / resource name. Open the file for editing if it exists, or create a buffer and set up so that saving will create an override on save. Another thing we could do is expand variables for dollar packages and then strip off packages path to arrive at the appropriate thing. But that would depend on how exactly we invoke the command. So we don't need to worry about that here. If and, oh man, unpacked version already exists. Just open it. Change that to be unpacked. Oops. Open the name as a resource. So we might say instead of res name, it might just be called resource is equal to that. Is example would be is new override. Actually, it would be, whoops, too far. Oh, did I? Oh, I spelled that wrong. Oh no. Resource is equal to is new override should actually be underscore OA is new override because it's going to be an override audit magic hidden setting, and that's how we like to do. Mark the view as an opened, as a potential view is self window active view, and then we set that setting and trigger this. Make sure that it is read only but left as scratch. File is left as a scratch buffer until the first modification. Now, we haven't really succeeded in doing something where we could undo back to an unmodified tab as if the file actually existed. But I think having the tab be modified in that case is better than the package resource viewer method of doing this, where if you push undo too many times, the content of the file disappears and you have to put it back. So there's that. File is left as a scratch buffer until the first modification. Sublime turns off mini diff for packed files that it opens. Before the first save of a new override, mark, try to create. So marks this as no longer a potential new override. That would actually be a log of some sort. Maybe there's no way to get the reference document. Because if there was, you could check to see if the file has actually been modified. Another way to do this would be to have, no, that wouldn't work. Say, have on pre-save, do something like see if it should mark the buffer as scratch, but that doesn't matter because you can't stop a save from happening. On pre-save and on save automatically trigger once the file name has been selected. And just like that, if we were to quit and restart just to make sure, it still seems to do what one would want. If I said VPF user prefs and looked at mini diff, I don't even have it in here. So if I said mini diff, and as we can see there, the value of, say, false, like so. So I don't get mini diff action for any file, including that one. And then when I hit the thing, I'm not getting it here either. I believe the default setting would be auto, right? Oh, the default is false? No, close Windows when, oh, I see. The default is true. Auto enables modified line indicators on tracked files within Git. So if I said this to auto, like so, and close that, now when I hit the key, I do get view.settings.get mini diff. It is set to auto. The ASP package shouldn't be. True, enable it for all files, auto, enable it for tracked files within Git, false, disable modified line indicators. Now, we're specifically setting it to auto, so the fact that it wants to track a file that doesn't exist in Git, like for example, if I save this, that's still doing a thing, huh? Well, I mean, what can we do about that? Not a lot. But we do set the setting in if it was told to. See, we could change this to if minidiff is true and not check to see if it's auto, or if minidiff and minidiff is not equal to auto, then set it so that if the value was true, it would just always be turned on, and false, it wasn't. But then if the person actually had a package that they were creating an override for in Git, it wouldn't quite work correctly. So I don't like that sort of thing. Reference document is the entire content of the buffer. Then turn on the mini diff setting and set the reference, which will only do if it's true. So maybe we could even do it in that order. Still seems to work. We'll try that with clean start too. But yeah, I think that is more or less what we want. Let's go ahead and just do that, from a clean type start. Oh, see, oh, sorry. There we go. Do it before the plugins. You gotta wait for plugins to load. Close without saving. Might be nice to even have that command as the view package file command so that you could automatically fiddle stuff, but it's easy enough to do that sort of thing with package resource viewer and so on and so forth. User OA. Oh. That seemed to be okay. I believe there is some magic issues with this command. If I said window.run command test, then it's asking me for any file in any package. So maybe I pick something that I know that there's multiple directories in. Theme default, and a thing. And it says it picked sidebar scroll bar horizontal from theme default. It doesn't have the full path. There's issues with this particular code. I believe I've also showed this in the past as well. This test browse allows you to, as we just saw, browse packages. So if I did it this way, the default is we're not specifying a package and we're saying we want every possible file. So we can literally pick any file in any package, like so. You could say package. Oh, sorry. The package is default when you do it. And now it just automatically shows you the contents of the default package, and you could pick multiple things in here, like so. Again, without that part, it does ask you for the package, and there's an item at the top to let you go back to the list of packages, right? And along with being able to say package default, you could also say file type equals, say, override. Oh, sorry, not equals. File type overrides like this. And now it's only showing me actual override files and nothing else in this package. Notice transform is in here for whatever reason. I don't remember what I might have done there. Oh, I think I showed someone a bug fix at some point. We should look at that in a second. If I set this to non-overrides, then transpose is in here, but transform isn't, and not having the argument or having it set to all shows everything, and now we can see transform in the list. So this is something I created to be able to browse package resources. So you could use this to pick files to diff. You could also use it to create actual overrides as well, because if override audit's going to help you manage your overrides, maybe it should help you create them too. Then you don't necessarily need package resource viewer, which is a very popular package. I still recommend it, but it does have that very dangerous extract package command in it that it is really easy to pick when you did not intend to, and boom goes the dynamite, as they say. But I think that is probably enough stuff for this random bit of Sublime Text fiddle faddle. We need to do some more work on this because it's when it triggers the notification, you notice the selected file item here, it shows you the file. It's not grabbing the appropriate full resource. It's giving you the name of the file. And I think I meant to that was a different thing I started off doing before I decided that this is how I wanted that to be able to work. So this needs to actually give you the full resource spec instead. And once that's done, the next version of Override Audit, after the one we're going to release fairly soonish, fingers crossed, would allow you to create overrides as well and also tweak some of that other stuff up as well. But that is, let us say, all we have for this particular live stream. So if you have been, thank you for watching. Stole that from Singing Banana. Remember, you can join these live streams live when they happen. They generally happen on Mondays, and I try to tweet if that's not the case. Um, I've been toying with the idea of having it on an 8-day rotation instead of a 7-day rotation. So it would be Monday, then Tuesday, then Wednesday, then Thursday, then Friday, all through. But if you have any questions about anything in this video or any topic you would like me to cover in a live stream, you can pop into the live streams when they happen and ask, or you can drop suggestions down in the comments section below, or hit me on Twitter at OdatNurd. And there's also links down in the description of the video for my other channel where I don't do live streams and I post actual live videos. Up until for now, the last few videos have all been on build systems. Coming up in the next couple of weeks, one more video on build systems, and then we're going to switch into the plugin development of custom build targets. And then we'll see where we go from there with some package previews. So if you have any ideas for topics, let me know. But until the next live stream and the next video, this is OdatNurd asking you to please have a sublime day.